Welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoff. So good to be here with you. Thank you for tuning in, downloading, going to YouTube. If you want to watch the video, Go to the YouTube channel, Impact Driven Leader YouTube channel. You can watch it there. But if you're listening, that's great too. One thing I would love to thank M3 ! Just left an amazing review, said glowing things. Thank you. Appreciate it. It is the guests that make this show absolutely spectacular. Today is nothing short of that. I want to as well say, hey, if you get value from today's episode, share it with someone. Do them a favor by sharing this content, not for me, but today's guest, Nate Chatfield. He is a soccer coach, Lipscomb University. He's been a coach for the last 15 years. We talk about the emerging generation of workers. Yeah, okay. Get that into concept. Women's soccer coach at a highly successful Division I college, university. And we talk about the current athlete, right? The current athlete is actually the next generation, the next 2-3 years, 1 year, 2, 3, 4 years, they're going to be the employees at the organizations you work with. We dig through what they're facing today that's so unique and different. Also, the tools, pieces that leaders need to employ to lead them the best. As well, we wrap up, we talk a little bit about the Enneagram and how he is effectively using that to interact, build relationships with players. As always, one last thing. If you are not subscribed to the Impact Driven Leader newsletter, you can go to my website, tylerdickerhoff.com. There's also a link here in the show notes to make sure you can get onto that. I share with you a 4-part video series as well, 4 days to maximum impact, add a little bit of value to you. Thanks for being here. I'll wrap up at the end, go through a few notes, tie it all up, send you on your way and empower you. You know what? The world needs better leaders just like you. Nate, how you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome, Tyler. How are you, brother?
I'm good. I am great. I'm excited for this conversation, not because it's two bald guys. If you're watching on video, you should be watching on video. You might want to put on sunglasses. That's more me, not you. You have some good matte finish today. I'm a little shiny. I would say it's the humidity here. We talked about that. It's not real humid in Spokane, but it is today. Dude, I'm excited to talk about, just have conversations like we've had, but also talk about leadership. The first place that I want to step into, and I think, it's going to lead into so many things, but we talked a little bit about this in the open, your unique perspective as a women's college soccer coach and interacting with the next generation of workers, especially the last, handful of years that you've been in the coaching area. And I really kind of want to get into that we've talked this month on the podcast about modern leadership, what that looks like, the modern workplace. And I want to get your perspective because you're on the ground floor working with our current students that are going to become professionals this year, next year, and the next few years and what they're experiencing. So that's a lot that I'm just handing to you as a package to see where you take off and run with the ball. Go put it in the net.
Yeah, I like putting it in the net. Scoring goals that's fun. So I've been in the coaching world.
That's your thing.
It was my thing many years ago. Many hair follicles and years ago that was my thing. Not so much these days. No, man. But I've been in coaching for 15 years and dealing with this generation. Maybe not dealing, but getting to interact with this new generation is so interesting, and it's amazing in certain ways, and it definitely has its challenges as well. This is one of the first generations that is really coming through with extreme levels of social media engagement, and for me, we are seeing levels of anxiety with modern athletes that I just have not seen before. And I think that you're seeing a real struggle with the modern coach trying to connect to the modern athlete. And I'll be honest.
So hold on. Let's take that real, again, as an athlete, as someone, and just break that down a little bit. When you talk about the athletes that you're dealing with and the level of anxiety, I think everyone can relate to, maybe having that player on the team that the dad puts so much pressure on, the parents put so much pressure on, and you would see them, they're free and easy at practice, but all of a sudden they go to the game and they're a different player because mom, dad, whoever's sitting in the, in the bleachers, and they're hawking at them, and you just see these kids kind of shrink back and crumble. They don't want to make a mistake. Are you talking about, to me, that's the classic person that dealing with anxiety in athletics. You're seeing more of that instead of just the one or two, like across the team?
That is exactly what we're seeing, and it is our team is a little bit unique, and I can explain a little bit more of that
Yeah.
later. But what I'm seeing is a major performance anxiety for a lot of these younger players, and particularly they just don't want to make mistakes. And I think it's starting at the earliest levels. So I know, Tyler, you've got kids that play club soccer. I've got kids that are playing club soccer. All the girls that I coach at the Division I level have all played at a high club level. And from the earliest ages, it is drilled into them to not make mistakes. And when mistakes are made, they just get, they just get roasted by these coaches.
Yeah.
And I've been on the recruiting trail a lot, seen a lot of coaches from all over the place, whether that be, clubs or high schools or, other colleges. And I hear the communication from some of these coaches, and I sit and I think to myself, it is no wonder these girls have anxiety when they're spoken to this way. My daughter got in the car the other night after practice, and I could just tell she was like I could just hear it in her voice as she was talking. I'm like, baby, what's going on? She's like, oh, I almost started crying at practice today because the coach got on me. She's 12. She's 12 years old. She's not playing on the ECNL, and there's a 30-year-old man communicating with her in such a way that she's about to cry. And I'm like, man, there is a better way to do this. But yeah, we are seeing it bleed through all the way from club to high school into college. And unfortunately, some of these girls are going to carry this into the next phase of their life, like this performance anxiety and this really lack of freedom, lack of joy. And as an athlete, you understand this. When you play in fear, when you play locked up, you will never perform at your best. The best athletes are always the one that get into flow. You will not get into flow unless you're playing with a level of joy and freedom that we just don't see athletes have these days, not nearly as often as we should.
Yeah. It's, a common, a friend of ours, Colin Henderson, he and I have chatted about this. You guys have chatted about this. It's really an epidemic. It's an issue. And I think often, like you mentioned, the coach, and it's why I'm passionate about it, because there's a better way. There's a better way to lead. This podcast is about that, empowering, guys our age, women our age, to say, hey, even though you dealt with that coach, there's a better way to do it. It's kind of funny. Mother's Day, we're recording this just after Mother's Day. I was talking to my mom. She was at my son's baseball game. I missed her, didn't see her. And my son's struggling through baseball. It's first year playing since, T-ball coach pitch. And he's struggling, just not comfortable. And has good coaches. They're encouraging them. And my mom was talking to my wife about just going through it and realizing that, hey, you're not always going to be the best, but a coach that encourages you, man, that's when you'll actually thrive, instead of the coach that looks at you. Maybe you're not the best. Maybe you're, not the most athletic, whatever it may be. And they comment on all the things you're not, rather than building up all the things you are. And quickly it comes into, this discussion where kids want to turn and run. And unfortunately, that's what they're being led through, not to make them tougher, but just saying you're not worthwhile. You don't have value. And I think as generations, people that have gone through those insecurities, the people that are in their life that can empower and speak belief into them, they get much more out of those individuals than the person that's always criticizing, and trying to, I guess, toughen them up. There's this comment that you're like, oh, our workforce is all about, cursing and aggressiveness and this or that. And so we should just accept it, instead of saying there's a better way. There's a better way.
Yeah. You're hitting the nail on the head right there. We talk a lot with our girls about identity. And one of my good friends, her name's Shannon O'Brien, she shared this with me one time. And I'm not sure if it was original to her, but I'm going to give her credit for it because I don't know where it came from. She said, we need to separate our who from our do. And so many of our modern athletes, they tie their identity to their performance in a game. And me, I have a privilege of working at a faith-based school. So we actually get to talk about God and how God has actually created us for something beyond just this game. So we'll see these athletes whose, their moods, their entire life kind of ebbs and flows on how well they played in the last game. I see it with men, I see it with women, but since I'm working with women primarily,
Yeah.
I've encountered it so many times. And that's something at Lipscomb that we really try to dive deep into, is creating that atmosphere where your value as a person is not tied to your performance on the field. Now, as a competitive coach, I understand that we have to produce results. I understand that. But I think there's this amazing dynamic tension that we can find between results and relationships. Those two should not be at odds. I think you can have a deep relational connection with your players, and I think that you should in a lot of ways, but
Mm-hmm.
also demand that competitive excellence side. And I think when you're able to
Yeah.
do both, that's when you find something truly special. And for me, this is something that I've just really come to believe this, that trust is the currency of relationships. It's the
Yeah.
currency of the
100%.
relationship between the player and the coach. If there is trust that has been built, you can make decisions for players. And regardless of whether or not they agree with that, they will be able to handle it because you've built that trust. But I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing now is so many of these players, they flat out do not trust their coaches. And another way I've said it is anytime I have the ability to make what I call a relational deposit in someone's life to encourage them, to build them up, I'm actually adding to that bank account. So I'm trying to stack money up inside that relational account. So when I do have to make a withdrawal, which I am going to have to do occasionally as a coach, I don't overdraw on the account. And when you overdraw, you get an
Yeah.
overdraft fee,
Yeah.
right? We've all hopefully we don't get
Yeah.
those. I haven't had one in a while, thankfully. But we see so many of these coaches. There's constantly withdraw, and these players are crushed beneath this weight of their coaches.
Yeah.
And man,
Yeah.
we've got to find a better way. And I think, like you were saying, there is a better way. And I'm working through some stuff right now to try to help coaches
Yeah.
find that better way.
Well, and that's an area that, I and thankfully a lot of other guests that I get to have and speak with are passionate about. And there is a way to move forward, and it doesn't have to just accept the way it's been, or think that, oh, we have a generation that's not tough enough. We have a generation that has been entitled or pandered. And to me, that comes back to, as parents, as older leaders,
Yeah.
accepting our responsibility to say, hey, our children are who we've made them. And that goes on parents. That also goes on coaches. So if we're looking in the workforce and we're saying we don't like the product of what's been delivered to us, well, look at the way that they've been modeled and educated and brought to where they're at. My opinion of youth sports, the club that I'm involved in, where I coach and I'm a board member, it's a character development program. That's it. It just happens to be, we do that through soccer, and there's that for baseball. There's that for gymnastics. My daughter is involved in dance, and it doesn't matter where we're at. Our children are a product of those activities. And that's what shows up to you as a college coach, or, as a college educator for so many of them. That's what they're expecting, is based upon what they've been conditioned. And so as leaders that are in the workforce, it's kind of like, all right, we need to not focus on what do we do to entice the millennials. As a leader who is, on that line, the Gen X, the millennial leader, I really need to be now, through the pandemic, this ushering forward of a new generation, to say, hey, what is most important to Gen Z? And I hear this loud and clear from you. It is relationship and trust through connection. That's what I hear. That's what I believe as well, and see it in my own interaction. And I think you almost have to spend more time there to start than anything technical.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I know you're a John Maxwell fan. I'm a big John Maxwell fan. And one of his best lines, it's one of the classics, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You have to create an environment
Yeah.
where these players feel safe, where they feel safe. Without that safety, without that relationship, you might be able to adjust their behavior. You might get them to do the things you command, but you'll never get them to really buy into something unless they feel safe. When you remove that safety,
Yeah.
like you see it all the time at the professional levels.
Yeah.
Once a manager loses the locker room, it's over. it's over. Like
All
I'm
right,
a
in the middle
Chelsea.
of this conversation, I just want to take a moment to invite you, if you're not a subscriber to the Impact Driven Leader newsletter, to go to the Impact Driven Leader /free course. You're going to get the 4 days to maximum impact video series as well. Submit you into my email sphere where you can learn more about the Impact Driven Leader community. So now back to the rest of the episode.
It's over. Like I'm a
Yep.
Chelsea fan. They had a terrible season this year. It
I'm
was
sorry,
awful.
dude. Dude,
I know.
it's horrible. It's horrible.
Thank you.
Did you see who won? Again, we're recording this on May 18th. Did you see who won yesterday? That's all right because he's a really good manager.
Oh yeah, Pep.
Another bald guy.
Yeah, that's his best quality.
Sorry
He's
for
bald.
anyone that's not a professional soccer fan. We'll just, skip that 30 seconds. All right, go ahead, Nate.
No, but once you lose that locker room, once you lose that trust, it's over. It's over, and it's so difficult to regain that trust. And a lot of these coaches that I see, and players that I inherit from other programs, there was no trust, and now I have to work doubly hard to say, "Hey, I'm on your side. We are not
Yeah.
here to crush you. We are here to help you thrive." That's a word we use a lot in our program. We want you to thrive, and it's so foreign to a lot of these players. So I'm really encouraged to hear that your club that you get to work with.
Why do you think that it's so foreign?
I think that they have been programmed by most of the places that they've been that results are the only thing that matter. Go out and perform. So I was at an event recently, and I was watching a bunch of recruits, and they were playing, and there was a club coach that was instructing. It's not my club. It's a long ways from here. And there was a player that picked up the ball defensively. She took off a player, and rather than driving at the defense, she kind of pulled it back. And the coach starts screaming. He goes, "Stop being nice. Kill, kill, kill." And I was like, whoa. Saying that to a 16-year-old girl is like, go kill someone. It was like violent language. And I understand, like, you have to attack. Like, you've got to be ruthless when you're trying to score goals. I get that. But some of the language that's being used towards these girls, it was kind of like surprising to me. And those are the environments. And unfortunately, that's not uncommon. I mean, I hear a lot of coaches. It's not uncommon. So they come to us. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe at all.
100%.
So we have to try to build that trust with them. And it is so strange for them as we try to build trust. Hey, we care about you as a person way more than we care about you as a soccer player.
I've unfortunately experienced that with my daughter and her coach. Someone that I quite honestly, very few people I've interacted with have no right to be coaching high school girls. I believe it that boldly. The second piece of that is it's not disconnected. It's not disconnected because I believe whether they're an athlete at Lipscomb or they're just a student at Lipscomb and they're working in the student union, guess what? They're asked to perform because there's a job that needs to be done. What is their leader? How is their leader interacting with them? Mm-hmm. And I don't believe the soccer field, the football field, the baseball field, the basketball court, that there's just different leaders there than there are at, or any workplace. I mean, you go to any of the different places, I think it's all the same pool of leaders because often they work at both. Our coaches, there are professional, a lot of, clubs have professional coaches, but yet a lot of coaches are doing other things. Either they enjoy that or they're interacting, leading in other places. And so I don't think this conversation is, it's just about women's club or athletic, soccer. It is, no, it's across our entire landscape in our country. There is one belief that I have, and I've seen this in youth sports, and I think it also ends up being the root where it happens a lot in business is people are judged based upon their results. So they'll chase results short term, play the finite game, the Simon Sinek, difference between finite and infinite, because our society is not allowing for that infinite, that development, that saying, hey, where are we today? Are we growing forward? And as I look at the economy of youth sports in the US, it's all dollar driven. It's not development driven. You really have to fight to be able to be development driven because so often it's been ingrained as it's all about chasing the dollar.
Yeah, that's true. And in my sport, it's chasing the dollar is it's not a moneymaker sport. I mean, we're not football.
Yeah.
We're not men's basketball. So there's not a ton of money in our sport. So the coaches at the higher levels, they'll make pretty decent money. But for a lot of the coaches I interact with, money is a factor, but you're not going to become rich being a women's soccer coach. Or
Yeah.
very, very few will anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying 100%.
Yeah. So let me also kind of, again, in this workplace, Gen Z, I mentioned this earlier, and I'd love to see what you're seeing university or what you're seeing interacting with different players. If you're aware, in college athletics, we have the NIL, the name, image, and likeness. It's a way for college athletes now to get paid for representing their university, being out there where it wasn't the case before. How is that influenced? Not necessarily, Lipscomb, but how do you see that's influencing the current college athlete, the current college student in regards to this workplace?
Yeah. Well, man, that's such a great question, and it's one that we could probably spend multiple podcasts talking about. I think that the NCAA for years has had a monopoly on these players, and has made billions, hundreds of billions of dollars off of the backs of these athletes. I've never thought that was fair, to be honest with you. I remember when I was a high school athletic director, I remember saying, no, these players should be paid their value. People are like, no, that'll wreck the game. And I'm like, well, the universities and these athletic departments, I'm a big University of Michigan fan, grew up in Michigan.
I'm sorry.
Hey, I'm happy about this. I am so proud of that. I should have worn my Michigan blue. But the Michigan football made so much money every single year, and these players they can't afford. I mean, they get cost of living money, but they can't afford regular stuff. If they want to buy a PlayStation, well, you're probably going to get it in a shady way. Someone's going to give it to you, and that's technically illegal. You couldn't do it. And so, after a long time, all these court cases and everything, now these players can receive money. And I think that the NCAA, honestly, in classic NCAA fashion, didn't have the correct model as they worked through it. So there's a friend of mine who's on the national board of college basketball coaches. And he's like, Nate, the NCAA did not know what they were doing here. They've opened up something here, both in terms of the NIL money and the transfer portal, that now they are trying to figure out, what do we do with this? And it is changing the landscape. So I know even here in Nashville, I was told there's a girls basketball player here, goes to a local school, and she's the top player in the country. And I was told she's already signed her NIL deal, and she's going to get $4 million. I'm like, wow. I mean, that is so much money. And for my sport, it's not really affecting me, but I know it's having an effect on some of my good friends that are in the basketball department, because they've got or on the baseball team, and some shady stuff going on there where your best talent is now being poached by the Power Fives, who have massive pools of money. They have entire departments now that are tasked with helping to get this money and funnel it to where it needs to go. And it's becoming very difficult for the big money sports at the mid-major level to compete with that. Like I said, it hasn't affected me yet, because we're not a money sport. I don't know of any female soccer players that are on much NIL money at all. But basketball, oh yeah, football, baseball, for sure. So it's going to be a challenge. It is going to be a challenge. There's no doubt.
What do you think it's taught the pool of college athletes? I mean, here where typically you had to go to, college, if you chose to go to college, it's because I'm not going to go into the workforce right now. I'm going to get my education first and then enter the workforce. Do you see that it's showing them, hey, this idea of being a professional, meaning however you're going to make money in the world, whether that is having a job, it doesn't matter, a 9-to-5 classic, right, in an office sense, remote, again, take with concept of that, or playing the actual sport, that there's a way for them to make money that's not the typical way. How are they processing that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can give you a satisfactory answer on that. I think that one of the benefits of the NIL is that it is giving the players a level of freedom where they can actually they can be creative with how they want to make money. So, I mean, we know a lot of people that are influencers, and they're making money off Instagram by just repping a couple of products here and there, and they do quite well. Now, a lot of people get frustrated with that, like, oh, they're not adding value. Well, who are you to say whether or not they're adding value? I mean, if there's an influencer that's got a couple million followers and she shows her Apple Watch and says, hey, you should get an Apple Watch, that's good business for Apple, and it's good business for her.
Yeah.
So I think the free market is constantly evolving, and I think the athletes that have the ability to make a lot of money through NIL, I think they should do it. I mean, like if the system is now available and ready for them to use, I have no problem with athletes using the system that is in place. How is it going to affect the workforce? I don't know. I think time will tell. It's still a little bit new.
The view that I have there, and this again, I think it's very pandemic centric, where we force people to go home. Now they're working remote. They have different times to do things, whether they got laid off, and all of a sudden I have to figure it out. Simon Sinek has a great little video talking about this. Is we have, even though a dejected workforce through the pandemic, an empowered workforce to say, hey, you can figure it out, make it through. And one of the things, again, is centric to Gen Z now coming to age, and we're leading Gen Z. The reality is they have a lot of different ways to make money at their disposal. You're not the only way. And so if you try to back them into a corner and say, hey, you have to play only the style of game that I want to play, you either play that or you have no opportunity to play. They might give you a finger. They might just be real nice and say, no, thank you, and go do something else. It's no different than I would say that in some ways now with the transfer portal that you mentioned, players have a lot more of that freedom than they did in the past. Yeah. It used to be if you wanted to transfer universities, unless you were going down a level, you had to sit out a year. Now it's kind of wide open, which those two things, again, very centric to sport, but yet very common in the workplace, because the workplace, people have so many options. There's 4 million people changing jobs every month. You can't back them into a corner and say, this is how you have to work. You need to lead in a way, coming back to our trust and our identities. Like, how do you fit into what we're doing? How can I help you make the most of it? Do you see that connection, or what are your thoughts? Does that spur of yours?
That there's a massive connection, an absolutely massive connection. So if you look at a regular 9 to 5, right? If you go to work and you are constantly berated every day, you will not be there very long. That's just a fact, because there are so many options available to you. And for the longest time in the NCAA, it was like, yeah, you could leave your job, you can go somewhere else, but it's going to cost you big time. Like, you're going to have to sit out, you're going to have to transfer out. Like, it's going to be a real pain in the butt. And it used to be the coach actually had to sign off on your transfer. Now, these athletes, they have a measure of freedom to say, coach, I'm going into the portal. And what I think you're going to see is that the coaches that have been able to gain the trust of their players and actually have a relationship, and there's a mutual respect there, those coaches, those programs are going to thrive. So at Lipscomb, I've been here now, I'm going on to year number 6. We have picked up Power 5 transfers every single year, because people, like, now it's easier for them to get into the portal. And they look at, one, we're in Nashville, which is great. We're Division I, which is great. We're a very competitive Division I, won 5 out of the last 6 ASUN championships, which is awesome. And we care about people. Like, you're going to be treated well. The way our staff wants to operate is we want to treat these young ladies the way that we would want a coach to treat our own daughters. I've got 4 daughters. I want to coach in the way that I would want someone to coach my own children. And now I think you're going to continue to see that shift of players just bouncing all over the place. The NCAA is trying to control it now, but we'll see how that's going to work out. Yeah. But I think that the programs that are able to build relationships are going to retain that top level talent much more easily than the coaches who kind of berate their players. Those girls are going to be out. Those players are going to be out unless you can, guarantee them something else. You know what I'm saying? So I think for a program like mine, it's been really, really good. For other programs,
I think
not so good.
You could take every piece of that. And again, people are people. Whether it's not coach and athlete, it is leader and worker, it's leader employee, it's leader team member. It doesn't matter. I believe that through the pandemic, again, it showed people have options. Like you're a great leader that cares about people. You put them first and foremost. You don't berate them because they don't open their laptop. So many listeners have now heard me talk about the CEO that did that. Instead, you say, hey, I know you're important to us. If you match our values and we're trying to go, and you trust in that we're going there as well, then we'll all go there together.
Mm.
Those are the organizations to me that will continue to financially thrive.
Yeah.
And the ones that don't embrace that are going to continue to struggle because they're going to have tremendous turnover, which is extremely costly. And
Mm.
they're going to end up the society now, through especially a generation that has voiced so much through social media. I
Mhm.
don't need to bring up a recent company that is facing 25% reduction in sales because the society said, "Hey, don't force that on me.
Yeah.
I don't need to have an opinion on it. I'm not fighting it every day, but if you force it on me, I'm going to choose to not consume your product, and
Mhm.
you're going to have to deal with it. And
Yeah.
if you don't want to deal with it, well, shame on you."
Sure. Yeah. No, completely
Yeah.
agree. Completely agree.
So
I think that the multitude of options that these players have now, both in the workforce and in my industry, in Division One athletics, is creating a much more competitive environment where, the rich might get richer in certain cases because they're going to have more NIL money, but for us, they're coming to us for like real substantive
yeah,
relationships combined
yeah,
with highly competitive athletics. And I think the businesses and teams, companies that can find that balance are the ones that are going to see
yep.
long-standing success.
Exactly. Want to transition a little bit. You had mentioned to me that you've done some work kind of some outside universities, working with the Enneagram, working with,
Yeah.
some of that development. I'd love for you to kind of just share with that with me, because again, I think it doesn't matter if it's a 21-year-old, women's soccer player, or a 21-year-old that's working in a, hospitality industry. They're the same people. So what are you doing there, and how are you seeing those individuals grow, transform, and really be empowered?
Yeah, great question. So I came across the Enneagram 5 years ago when I came here to Lipscomb. I'd never heard of this thing before. I was like, okay, what is this voodoo? What is going on here? I don't know what this is. And the more I've studied it, the more it has really helped to transform my relationships, the way I see myself, the way I interact with others. Because my wife and I, we would have these conversations. We would see the exact same thing and come to completely different conclusions. And like
I'm
if
glad
you
you said that, because I thought it was just my wife and I.
yeah, I
So
was
I'm
going to say,
glad.
if you've been married for more than 5 minutes, you've had that conversation. We're like, what
Yeah.
are you looking at here? And
Mm-hmm.
what I love about the Enneagram is it speaks directly to why we think, feel, and act the way that we do. So a lot of the personality studies that I've done are more designed around, okay, this person does this person does that, but they never get to the why. So, what the Enneagram helps us to do is understand the core motivations of people, their core fear, their core longing, their core desire, and their core weakness. And if you can understand what those longings are in yourself and in other people, it transforms the way you're able to communicate and connect with those people.
Yeah.
So in coaching, I can communicate with one player in a certain style. I would never communicate that way with another player. I'm not treating either of them unfairly. I'm treating them differently because one player is able to receive communication in a certain way while the other is not. And I think
Totally.
that if coaches could even understand themselves through the light of the Enneagram, it's just a tool. I mean, there's nothing crazy about it. It's just another tool in your tool belt. But if you understand why you do what you do and you can recognize those patterns in your life, well, then you can actually shore up some of those weaknesses and learn to really empathize with someone who is in another space. And for us, I'm privileged to do a lot of the trainings with our team. I've done some with other universities as well. And the whole idea is fostering the trust within the team, creating that culture, that chemistry, that unity that so often is missing. I want to develop trust within my team and within other programs that I'm blessed to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The fact that you said, I'm not treating them unfairly. I'm treating them differently.
Mm-hmm.
That's to me, it's been a challenging concept for sometimes leaders, and depending on what school of thought they came through, is like, I need to treat everyone the same. I look back to John Wooden again as an example in leadership, and he's like, I can't. They don't deserve to be. They have different motivations. They have different desires. They have different skills and abilities, and I need to treat everybody differently I will treat everyone fairly because of how I treat them, but it has to be different based upon who they are, what they bring, and or, just their I guess temperament motivations, I think is important. Goes back to, the comment that you made about your daughter and the coach, almost making her cry. Unfortunately, it seems like that individual did not understand
Hmm.
what motivated her and or how to help her do something different. And that's what I've seen so often in leadership and in places of leadership roles, coaches, that just not taking the time to say, okay, who am I interacting with? How do I
Hmm.
need to say this?
Yeah. So my daughter, I don't like to number my children, but she's 12 now. So we've talked about the Enneagram. I had her take one of the tests from some friends of mine that live here in Franklin, actually. And she took the test, and it confirmed my suspicion of what I thought she was. I like to try to guess what people's numbers are. She's a 1 on the Enneagram, according to
Yeah,
her test and according to my interaction with her. And one of the key attributes of the 1 is they have a very harsh inner critic. All of us have that inner coach that's always in our ear saying something to us. And you can train that coach, but it's very difficult. Most of the time, they're negative. But particularly with the 1s, the Enneagram has 9 numbers, so my daughter being the 1. That coach took something small that she did and basically said to her, "What is wrong with you? How could you do that?" And that is the most crushing message that a 1 can hear, is that I have failed and I can't live up to the standard, because they tend to be very perfectionistic. And when you feel like you have fallen short of the standard, it's crushing to you. An 8 on the Enneagram, when they fail to meet a standard, they are more likely, when a coach challenges them, to say, "You know what, I'm going to show you," and they step up and they absorb that challenge, and they get really angry, and it can propel them to better performance, but it's just a completely different response. So
totally.
if I'm speaking to a 1 on my soccer team, and there are many of them, some of my favorite people in the world, what I'm always going to do with them, even when they mess up, I'm going to applaud the effort. I'm going to say, "That, I saw what you were doing there, and I love that. That was a great effort. I want to see more of that." And when they really screw up and they completely make the wrong decision, my language has to shift a little bit. I'm not ever going to say, "How could you possibly think that?" Or what is the matter with you? It will just crush them. And I've heard that language, Tyler. You'd be shocked. You'd be shocked. Maybe you wouldn't, because you're a club coach, but it's
No,
shocking
no, I unfortunately no.
how much I hear language like that. And I was like, my goodness, what are we doing out here? But yeah, learning to understand your players, what motivates them. If you understand what motivates someone, that's half the battle.
There's 2 main segments that I really want to focus on. But before we get there, just have to let you, it's the first time it's happened. It's the real world. I'm going to tell you what happened. Nate's computer accidentally filled up with data we weren't able to finish, but I was going to wrap up. Here is the wrap up, making sure that we understand that, using tools like the Enneagram, man, they're essential for you to find a way to interact, to understand. I look back, and the Enneagrams have been a big part of my life. The color code, the love language test, the strength finder, all those different assessments, man, this is what they do. And he mentioned it. They put tools in your tool belt. Why? Because relationships matter. As Nate so boldly pointed out, if we can focus on the identity of the person, separate who they are from what they do, build trust, interact with them, really develop their relationship, doesn't matter what you're doing. You can be women's soccer coach. You could be a network marketer. You could be a, HR director for, multinational company. You could be working on a farm. It does not matter. People are all the same. When you can build trust, understand who they are, what they are about, what motivates them, man, you're going to accomplish the most. And we have a generation coming through, as Nate so aptly pointed out, that's dealing with more anxiety. Why? Because there's more pressures. It's more visible. My wife and I often talk about this, what our life would have been like had we to deal with social media and all the eyeballs, all the tensions, not able to get away, right? That happens for so many. As I described, the player who has that parent who's just putting so much pressure on them. Those aren't only players that are playing in a soccer game and a baseball game and a football game. Those are also people that come to work and dealing with, if you fall into that same path, they're going to react the same way. They're going to want to turn and go. And as I mentioned, as Nate, we talked about the workers today, and we've talked about this the last several weeks with different guests, that they have choices. So as leaders, we need to get better. We deserve better. And just because it's been done away doesn't mean it should be continued. The last piece that I want to focus on that really impacted my life is understanding everyone needs to be treated differently. They still all need to be treated fairly, but everyone's different. We can't blanket and treat everyone the same. An impact-driven leader understands that I need to treat people as people. And I wouldn't expect you to treat me the same as my wife or someone else because we're different. We have different desires, motivations, tolerances. As Nate and I shared, wrapping up a little bit on the Enneagram and in how the different Enneagrams are either healthy or how they interact. For me, when I'm healthy, I'm encouraging, I'm pouring belief into people, I'm doing all those things. As an Enneagram 8, when I'm unhealthy, watch out, I'm coming in swinging. I've been challenged. I've been backed into a corner. Now, the key for me understanding is with authenticity, recognizing when I've gone astray and quickly saying and apologizing, owning it, being authentic to say that's not in my heart and what I desire, and being willing to do that. And I think more leaders that are willing to do that, that's what moves them past toxic masculinity, toxic authenticity. Oh, this is just who I am, into places of genuine authenticity, genuine vulnerability, genuineness. When we can do that, man, we build relationships, and relationships are what matter in this world. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. See you next time.